Are there any comments or additions to the minute? Welcome.
Thank
If not, I make a move to approve the minutes of October 7th. Do I have a second? Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Unanimously approved the minutes. Thank you. So now to the main reason for this meeting. Robert, would you please introduce our special guest and let us know what she's going to talk with us about?
Today we have Paula Coleman from HDL. We also call HDL about I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. So Paula Coleman is here to present our fiscal year 24-25 property tax analysis. You have my staff report, and included also with your packets were the reports from HDL, and also a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that Paula will be going through. But real quick, on item number 3, I listed the new assessed property values, and I just wanted to kind of make a note and comment for the I had mentioned that the assessed property value growth was 257%. That number is the dollar value growth is increased by 257% from fiscal year 12 to fiscal year 24-25. And then the actual assessed property value growth is 157%. So I just wanted to make those mental notes. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Paula Cohn here to present to us.
Okay, we've got a little bit of technical issues. The clicker doesn't work and I don't have Zoom on my laptop, so.
There you go. Well, you can put it up there and
Yeah.
we'll play it. And everyone has their packets. So on the electronic, there's an electronic version of the packet, and then there's the actual, what I put on your desk were the actual bounded copies, as I mentioned in the email, that are each of yours to have. We're going through the PowerPoint presentation,
Yeah,
and then from there, any questions that you may have. And it's basically the information in the PowerPoint is information that is collected from the actual reports that you have. And, we could have a question and answer as we go through the process in presentation.
While we're getting, am I on?
Yeah. Green is, there you go.
Thanks. So while we're getting this set up, just a little bit of a prologue here. I want to remind you that the 24-25 fiscal year contains events that happened in calendar year 2023. Calendar year 2023, the interest rates started being hiked, were high almost the entire year. A lot of the comparisons I'm going to be making today are going to be with 23-4. 23-4, the events of calendar year 2022. So those values were enrolled on January the 1st, 2023. 2022, a good year. Low interest rates, a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of properties being built. That is not what we're seeing in calendar year 24. So I'm going to warn you that while 24-5 was not as robust as 23-4, 25-6, I do not believe is going to be as robust as 24-5 is. And there are a number of reasons for that. Go ahead, Andrew, and go to the next slide. And you can go ahead and put all the arrows in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 enters. Go back. This is why I need to control.
We got
I am a type A. I will warn you about that right now. I need to be in control, but I'm not. So, yeah. Yeah, so this, 2 more.
Yeah.
1 more.
There
Okay.
you go.
So this, you got it going.
You got
So
it.
this graph
Thanks,
is
Anthony.
the timeline for the current fiscal year you are working in. It's the events that happened in calendar year 23 were enrolled on January 1st, 2024. Between January and June, the property roll is with the assessor. He turns it over to the auditor the 1st of July. The auditor has 2 months. They create the information that the tax collector needs for the tax bills. And then the tax bills are mailed generally in September. I think they went out in October this year. Taxpayers have the tax bills now. They're due now. They become delinquent in December for the first payment and delinquent in April 2025 for the second payment. The money goes to the tax collector. The tax collector waves at the auditor and says, I've got the money. And then the auditor apportions the revenue between November 24 and July or August 2025. So by the time the town of Atherton receives its last payment in July or August, you're 20 or 21 months down the road from the data that's driving the revenue you're receiving. Property taxes are a lagging indicator of what's happening. And that's why I can help you with budgeting, because by the end of the fiscal or calendar year, I know what's sold. You're putting your budget together for the next year, and I can provide that information for you. Next slide, please. Oh, I've got it. Never mind. So you gave me, oh, okay. I'm good with that.
The up button.
So for next year.
Oh, you're doing it back. Turn it around. There you go.
So for next year's budget, we should be doing 8.15%.
Okay.
Right?
This particular graph was not in your reports. I sometimes think looking at a 20-year view kind of puts information into perspective. And this looks at a 20-year view of the values that were enrolled by the assessor in the town of Atherton. You had a low point, the lowest average was in 2010-11, when your median price, or pardon me, when your values went down 0.07%. We were just coming out of the recession, but we're really being impacted by the events that happened in calendar year 2009, still in the recession. The largest increase of a year over year. All right, I am doing it right. There we go. Was in 2006-07, when your growth was 10%. Yeah, I'm good. Don't touch it. So, every year is different. I can't tell you what's going to sell. I can't tell you what the properties are going to sell for. I can't tell you how many are going to sell. We're always reacting to that information. And we forecasted a lower growth pattern for 24-5. That's what we're going to show you that you had. And in our 5-year forecast, we based 25-6 pretty much on what we were seeing happening in 24-5. We knew that the economists were telling us that the interest rates were going to go down. Some were saying spring, some were saying summer, some were saying fall. I have no confidence. I'm not an economist. So we went in conservative for 25-6. And of course, when you get your next forecast, which you'll receive in February 2025, we will have the information that's going to drive that, and we'll be able to help you better guess what's going to happen or forecast what's going to happen. Five-year history of values in town we show here, and just want to point out the bottom sets of two sets of graphs, your gross assessed value and your net taxable value. The difference between those two collection of data is that the gross assessed value includes every piece of property in the town of Atherton, properties that the city owns, properties that the county and the state and the federal government owns, schools that are in your community, properties like churches that get exemptions or nonprofits that get exemptions. All of those values fall out of the value that's taxed. At the bottom, your current value that's going to be taxed for 24-5, the current fiscal year, $16,386,551,372. That is an increase of 6.5% year over year. Last year in 23-4, your increase was 8.1% year over year growth. And please remember, if you're growing by $1 billion, it takes a lot more next year to overcome that new billion and see that same 1%. So you're always kind of climbing a little bit steeper hill as values are added to your roll. Looking at your growth in comparison to all the cities in San Mateo County, the high and the low are highlighted in gray. So the high was Brisbane with an increase of 13.8% in value. The lowest year over year percent change was East Palo Alto. A comment that in the town of Atherton, your value, if you look in the value column, the 24/5 net value, you have the 8th highest value of all the cities in the county. Your dollar change was the 7th highest dollar change year over year, and your percentage at 6.497 was the 6th largest increase. You know, I have some cities that focus on the percent and some cities that focus on the dollar change. You know, I think it bears pointing out that your dollar change was just under $1 billion, and there were only 5 other cities that grew more than $1 billion, many of those larger than you. $17 million in Daly City is their total value. Menlo Park is $28 billion. So, you know, each of those cities had to, again, surmount a little bit bigger growth element in order to get their percentages. Some of these communities have got biotech and data processing and data co-location areas, and those are high dollar facilities.
Excuse me, thank you. They're also including commercial.
Absolutely. You don't have a lot of that.
That we do not
Yeah.
have. Ours are single family homes.
For the most part, yes, they are vacant.
So
Those are your two
Yeah.
classifications.
when you look at San Mateo at 38 billion, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next slide. Come on. I know I did it twice, but it didn't do it. Do I try it again? There we go. I'm going to go ahead and put everything up on this. There you go. All right. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm showing you 2 years of information here. On the right is what drove the growth in the town of Atherton last year in 23-4, again, from the events that happened in 22. And on the left, the items that drove your growth in the current year. 2% is added in each of those years to properties that don't sell or add new construction. That's mandated per Prop 13. And those amounts in 1 year, the change overall was 3.04%, 1.94% of your total growth came from Prop 13, 2%. That was last year. And this year it was 1.89, so slightly less than the growth last year. If you look at the transfers of ownership, when properties sold last year in 23 on the right, they added 3.04% to your bottom line. The additive was 432 million. So that means that when the homes sold last year, the difference between the sale price and the value that was taxed on the roll that year was $432 million higher. The assessor is going to enroll that sale price the following year, and that's the growth that we're seeing here. The current year, the additive was 2.74%, so about a quarter of a percentage point less. And the additive was 421.5 billion year over year. If you look at the next two, the ones that I've highlighted in blue or teal, we have new construction, both non-residential and residential. In 23-4 on the right, if I total the 2% up, the 0.17 and the 0.60, that's 2.77% of the total growth last year. So 2.77 of the 8.15 had to do with something being built. And then on the left side, we add those two together this year, it's 1.39. So quite a smaller component being added to your, and the total value changed in the current year was 213 million. Last year, it was 394 million. Yes.
I just want to try to figure out the non-residential increase. Would that?
Vacant,
It was vacant?
vacant.
They're
A
vacant.
property that's being developed
Uh-huh.
is vacant
Uh-huh.
until it's completed,
It's
then it's
non-residential.
residential.
Okay.
Taxed, valued, just doesn't have a residential use on it yet.
So the college built a dorm. And when did that hit the assessor's rolls? Was that 2022 or 21? That's what I thought.
Is it built for college students?
Uh-huh.
So it's going to be exempt.
Oh, so it's not even going to
It's-
show up?
It's not even going to show up. The value is going to come in, the value is going to go out as exempt. End of story there.
Go ahead. Just to make sure I understand this. So new construction includes somebody going in, doing a tear down and then building from scratch.
That's a demolition, vacant property, build it up.
Okay.
Comparisons between the 2 years, says that production is slowing down.
Construction additive is not as much in 24-5 as it was in 23-4. I'm not in your building department. I don't know if they issued more, but issuing permits means nothing. It's which properties got completed certificates of occupancy or some progress appraisal. And if a piece of property doesn't get completed by the end of December,
Mhm.
you're going to not see it the next fiscal year. It's going to roll over to 26-7.
Mhm.
It's when you're finally going to see it roll in. So if you've got a lot of development that's not going to be completed in the next 6 weeks, you will not see that until 26-7.
We have so many projects that are ginormous and they are taking forever to complete. It has to be completed and then assessed.
Right. And that's why I usually put a time frame of like November to October,
Uh-huh.
because the assessor has to send people out in the field. They've got to do an appraisal. They've got to process that information. It's got to hit the roll.
Uh-huh.
And I am not confident with the growth that's going on in San Mateo County that they get them all every year.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure they don't.
They'll get them mid-year,
Yeah.
but mid-year ends up in a supplemental. Supplementals are pooled county-wide. It's not going to show on your roll until the next year.
Uh-huh.
So that's kind of like cracking the whip. You know, as soon as a project is completed, your building and safety staff needs to transmit that, whether it's by email, whether that's walking it over to Redwood City or wherever it is to turn it in and to make sure that it's in their hands.
It's not based on the sale price of the value of the property. It's
If
all
it sells,
based
it
on-
is.
Well, once it sells and is recorded, then it's based on that. But if it's just finished and not sold yet,
You had a couple of those, yes.
okay.
Yeah. You had a couple properties that were under development in 23, got completed.
Yeah.
Then got sold this year. So we're going to see growth on those next year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, some very expensive homes, I think.
Don't do that. The Prop 8s, I just point out because last year in 23-4, we're looking at the 22 events, low interest rates, lots of home sales. The assessor and those properties were selling for more. When we got to 23 and the interest rates went up, a lot of home sellers reduced their selling price in order to make it make sense with the interest rate hikes. So the median price went down because they were cutting their sale price. So the assessor is required by law to look at similar property selling within a similar area and apply a reduction to that and then review them every year. So those Prop 8s were positive last year, were negative this year. So that's a comparison. And I do this every year when I pull the data together because I want to know why did we see less growth? It's not just the 2% was applied to fewer properties. Other things are going on. And typically it's change of ownership, new construction, 2% CPI are the three big things that are going to result in your growth. And this year, the 2% CPI was 29% of your growth. The properties that sold were 42% of your growth, and the properties that were developed were another 21%. So those were the big items that caused your growth this year. Next. Yes. I show you this every year just to get this so you have the sense of what your share of the 1% ratio is. Back when Prop 13 was adopted, the assessors and the auditors were required to develop after legislation what your share of every tax dollar was going to be in each tax rate area that's within your jurisdiction. And in order to do this, they looked at the revenue that you received in the 3 years prior to Prop 13, so 1976, 77, 1976, 77, 78, and the total revenue that you received as a share of the entire revenue that was collected in your city, that's the share of the tax dollar you got. So if a school district received 40% of all the revenue collected in those 3 years, they got a 40-cent share. And of course, there was a shortfall. Everybody claimed poor. You lost about 60% of your revenue with Prop 13, and the state had a surplus, and they said, we're going to help you out here. We're going to give you a bailout, and we're going to take money from the schools and give it to you, and we'll backfill the schools with average daily attendance. And that plotted down the road for 14 years until the state couldn't balance their budget. And at that point, some legislators said, well, that bailout was never supposed to be permanent. We're going to reverse that. And now we're going to take money from cities, counties, and special districts, give it to the schools, Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund, and then you are on your own with that. So that worked fine, except that in San Mateo County, you have a lot of basic aid school districts who make enough property tax revenue to be able to support their average daily attendant requirement. And because of that, they're collecting ERAF from you they shouldn't be collecting, and that is refunded to you as excess ERAF. The vehicle license in lieu, which used to be a population-based revenue source, in 2004-05, when Arnold Schwarzenegger issued the revenue recovery bonds, said, we're going to take that VLF money, we're going to use it to pay off the bonds, and we're going to give you the same amount of VLF you got last year out of the ERAF pot. Because so there's a swap, right?
Yeah.
And so now, because they're giving you excess ERAF, there's not enough ERAF to pay the VLF in lieu. You and Napa County hits it this year as well. So now there's 2 counties other than, I think it's Alpine and Mono, which are, tiny. 2 counties with populace that are going to be complaining. Last year, the legislature wanted to take, instead of giving you back your excess ERAF, they wanted to hold that, pay your VLF, and give you back what was left. And your lobbyist said, no, you never should have taken the ERAF in the first place. Give us back what you shouldn't have taken. And, we're on our own, I suppose, for the VLF until it changes. So that's sort of in a nutshell, why you get now 8.57 cents in the largest tax rate area by value. Your shares in comparison to the other cities in the county of San Mateo are noted. It's shown to you by percent share. East Palo Alto, when Prop 13 was adopted, evidently they had a very high tax rate. They levied a high mill rate. They were doing something that required them to levy a high mill rate on their constituents, and Prop 13 memorialized that. So in essence, it really rewarded the guilty and punished the innocent for that.
Paula, I have a question based on the property tax dollar breakdown and something that I don't think is in your slide deck, but it was in the big packet that
Oh, yeah.
we got.
So you got an average as well.
Well, yeah, so I was trying to figure out, I looked and I ranked everything in the property tax dollar breakdown, and the highest amount was Menlo Park City Elementary General Purpose. But then when I went to the next page,
Yes.
they dropped down from being number 1 to being number 5, and I didn't
And that's
understand how that
because
happened.
the breakdown of the individuals in this particular tax rate area have a fewer number of those that are going to be split between than the average does. You have some school districts that service a part of your community and not other parts.
Okay.
but they're on the average. They're part of it, but they're not in the largest tax rate area. So if you count the number of taxing agencies and compare it to the number of taxing agencies you have here, there are more in the average because I'm looking at every tax rate area assigned to the town of Atherton with the shares that are being generated. I don't care where they are, what tax rate area they're in, so I don't have that with me.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So I believe then this is a snapshot of.
Yeah,
one
I've got
tax
that,
rate
but I
area.
don't have the average one. I did not bring that particular one, in the book. Yeah, yeah.
I'm sorry.
So you see how many are on this list?
Page 21 of the book.
Yeah, page 21,
Here's the weighted average.
for instance,
big
the
book.
County Harbor District, I'm guessing is not in that list.
No.
Yeah, they are. Okay,
Oh.
yeah.
Is San Francisco
Oh, yeah. there-
Creek Flood Zone 1?
Down, yeah, that's way down there.
San Francisco Creek. I don't see that one.
No.
Yeah, it's way down toward the
Right.
bottom.
Redwood isn't in there.
Right. So there's a different flood control. One may have a higher share than the other, depending on where it is. So you have Menlo Park Elementary. You've got Las Lomitas Elementary.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You've got Redwood City Elementary. So depending on where they were when Prop 13 was adopted, they're in some tax rate areas somewhere in your city. They may not be
Mhm.
generating a whole lot, but they're in there.
And so Redwood City Elementary would have been the Selby Lane School, correct? Or is that Menlo Atherton?
That's,
That's Sequoia. You're right.
Mhm.
You're right.
So that's the difference. If you're ever interested, I can give you a listing of all the tax rate areas with all their shares. But the thing is that the county of San Mateo does not subtract the ERAF. We do that because we know the amount that you're going to lose. They don't do it in the file that they make available, of course.
Mm.
Thank you.
There's our
Sure.
fire district on here. Oh, yeah. 13 point.
Yeah, they 13.83.
Yeah.
13.83, yeah, 13.83 cents.
13.83 cents.
This graph shows the value by use type as well as the revenue that each generates. You do have you do have 3 pieces of property that have got a commercial use code on them in town. As I remember, I want to say Menlo Circus. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Circus
what?
Club?
Yeah, I
The
think
Circus
I
Club?
think that they've got a commercial use on them.
At least in the book, I think you have them as agricultural.
Oh, were they
Because of the
Because they have a
horses,
horse- the
they have
horse.
horses,
horses as well?
But we have,
Yes, the vineyard.
which is
On,
privately
well,
owned
it's not
by a
agricultural
resident.
anymore, it's just dirt.
It's just dirt. Yeah.
Yes, but it was.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
property characteristic file that these come from the assessor's office, not a high priority to get right or to update. So we're always sort of letting them know because the client says, well, that's not agricultural anymore. There's a home there. It should be residential, kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So the revenue that we're estimating for the current fiscal year is $13,629,970. And then to look at your revenue, both in this current year and in a 10-year history on the right. Again, your revenue is broken down between the secured role and the unsecured role. You get a little bit of unitary revenue that comes through the state. It goes back to in the mid-1980s to a formula back then. You do have a fee that you pay the county for them to manage your property taxes, and that's the admin fee of $83,510. If we did not have a shortfall in ERAP and in VLF, you'd be getting $1,758,734. But because there is a shortfall, we're estimating that you're going to receive the same 57% that you received last year of that amount at a little more than $1,007,000. So you lost about a little more than $100,000 of that revenue source because of an insufficient amount of ERAF necessary to pay you.
Hmm.
That's not,
And every cities and the county are all in the same boat in San Mateo County.
So I just want to say, the ERAF seems to contribution has not kept up with inflation or that, because I remember in 2008, when I was running for council the first time, we were talking about ERAF about 900,000 back in 2008.
ERAF grows by the growth of your city every year.
Hmm.
The city grows 8.1%, your ERAF grows 8.1%.
Okay.
So
Ours-
however, the property value growth is what they use to increase your ERAF share by.
So I thought our ERAF was more than 1,300,000.
It is.
Yeah. So,
It's,
okay,
it's about 2.3.
yeah,
2.1.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, but I thought I heard her say that our ERAF payment.
No, the amount that is from ERAF to your VLF in lieu
Oh,
is, yeah,
to the VLF,
yeah.
okay.
This is the
Oh,
VLF assured.
Sorry, I missed
Yeah,
that
the
part,
VLF
sorry.
is the one that
But
we're
thanks for
having
clarifying.
issues with through the state.
Well, that makes me feel better.
And then on the right, it's a 10-year history of your revenues. Your general fund revenue has grown about $6 million in the past 10 years, and that's just based on the value change year over year. The next report looks at the top 40 value changes. I'm pointing this out because this is 24/5, and again, the events of 23 are being reflected here. All 40 of your top deviations are positive. Of this number, 21, those are the ones that are highlighted in yellowish gold, of the largest deviations were related to sales transactions where the median sale price was $10 million or greater. And these went ahead and I already talked about that. So those are the ones that I've highlighted. There were other sales also that occurred that were less than $10 million. And there was one piece of property that added in construction that wasn't a sale that's worth 29 million in between the top and the middle. So some of those are just properties that are being developed, haven't been sold yet, and that's why they've got an odd number. Pretty much anything in that current net taxable value column that ends in a 0, 0, 0, or 0, 0, 0 is a sales transaction. And I'm bringing this up because I want to show you next what we're seeing in calendar year 24. Oh, and these are sales. Yeah,
And you said anything over 10 million was supposed to be in yellow?
yes. Any sale price over 10 million.
Well, there's a number of them that are in the $20 million range that
There
aren't.
were two, one on
Highlighted.
Linda Vista and one on Elena on that report. Are
Linda
you looking at the
Vista,
same
Elena,
report I'm looking at?
And then down at Park Lane.
Park Lane. Those two properties had new improvements they didn't sell. Added, so their construction didn't sell, added construction. So the ones that I've highlighted are ones that sold over 10 million. A lot of the ones below those that didn't have sale prices above 10 million still have sales down below.
Got it.
So this is, again, the events in 23. The events in 24 are on the next two sheets, and I printed out the sales that we're seeing year to date on the next two sheets. On these reports, anything highlighted in yellow sold in 24 for more than $10 million. So there were 10 properties that sold for more than $10 million in 24 so far through August. There were 21 last year that sold more than $10 million. So right now we're about half of the number of sales in 24 that are selling for more than $10 million than we had last year. Those that are highlighted in blue, 10 of those sold for less than the value on the roll. So irrespective of what they sold for, the selling price is less than the value that was taxed in 24-5. So that means those properties are going to come on the roll slightly lower next year, not higher. And there were two on the first page that were highlighted blue over the yellow, which makes them sort of green. The very first one on this report and the one sort of 8 down or 7 down, both of those, one sold for 31,900,000. The value on the roll was 38,200,000. And the other one sold for 15.5 million and the value in the roll was 20.2. So those two properties are going to come on the roll next year at a loss of value year over year. Well, somebody, I guess, is anxious to sell. It's not selling at what they're offering it, and they've got to cut the price to sell it. And they probably either bought it, let's say in 1994 for $10 million. There's still money ahead, even if they're selling it for 15.
When you say it's on,
But it's being taxed at more than it's going to be taxed at next year. It gets 2% CPI. They may have added new improvements to it over the period of time, and that's how it got up as high as it was. And now they decide to sell it, and nobody's buying, and they need to get rid of it for some reason.
I have a question. Up at the very top, you have the non-single family residence
Mhm,
sales.
those
and
are
I'm just
all
scratching
vacant.
my head and saying, what is 170 Atherton Avenue, 154 Atherton Avenue?
I actually looked online that 170 Atherton, that's owned by Magnificent Trees LLC, is a huge piece of land that's
It's 8 acres.
trees
It was
everywhere.
a single family residence, right?
No,
Now they're
well, but
splitting
no,
it?
no, but there were several parcels on that 8 acres. And one had a house on it and the other, it was like a vacant land.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
like
a
an art-
garden. It was a
So it was
sculpture
treated
garden.
as more than one
Parcel.
Well,
parcel.
because they were
Yeah.
more than one
Weird, but
parcel.
part of it was residential. Was that
The one parcel
Right.
was, but I don't know how they did that.
probably the same with
Because they were
154
selling the
then?
whole thing for 100 million.
Right.
Yeah, but then it got parceled out.
No, it's not one big property now. No. There's one 2-acre parcel that is being divided up and sold for, 170 developed. There's another 4-acre and then there's another 2-acre.
Yeah.
And so the whole thing was like 8 acres.
It was 2 acres, 4 acres, and 2 acres.
Yeah.
Is how
That's
it
just what I
was looked
said.
at. And then there were several different methodologies for how they were going to cut it up. When we were looking at it from the housing standpoint, and
Anyway,
then that kind of all fell apart, and now a developer bought part of it, not all.
Bought part of it and then split it up into 2
Yeah.
parcels.
wait,
Or
no,
whenever.
they're just under construction now.
But it's probably going to be a pretty big increase because, I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things that I was going to ask, we haven't really gotten to that yet, but with the, excuse me, with the ability to lot split now, it strikes me that if you take an acre lot and split it in 2 and have two homes on a residential, single-family residences, it's going to be worth a lot more than it was as a single piece of land. Is that
Absolutely.
fair? Okay.
Yeah. But please
Depends
remember,
on what kind of house you put on. it.
Well, yeah.
please remember that
Or how much
you
bought
get
it for.
8.5 cents of every tax dollar.
Mhm.
So let's say you've got a $10 million house. The tax bill on that $10 million house is $100,000. You get 8% of that. You get $8,000. Is that right? $8,000 in revenue from that house.
Not a huge amount.
Not a lot of money.
I mean,
So yes, a lot of new development going on, but when you start looking at, it's taxed at 1%, you get 8% of that 1%. It ends up being a small amount of revenue in your pocket.
Yeah.
And that's why sales are important.
bigger, more expensive
Yes,
houses,
yeah.
60
Hey,
million, 100
You've
million.
got the most expensive housing in this county, yes.
As it is. So.
Okay, I'm going to go through these. The pictures are there. I just wanted to show what's happening with a number of the single-family homes on that green bar report. The largest increase was on a piece of property that was at 3540 Walsh Road. The increase was 15 million. It was sold for 15.5. that property last sold in 1987 and the value on the roll was $309,809. That's everybody laugh because that's the home you want to own that you're selling for $15 million.
Your mom and dad's house.
There's another single family home at 70 Amador LLC. It was purchased last year for 25.3 and it was an increase of 15.4 million. The next two that I looked at, oh, dare it. Here we go. Under construction, this property was is at 286 Austin Avenue. The increase was 14.1. They added improvements and then the property was sold for 922,500 last year. So that value came on the roll. That's one of the ones built, constructed, completed, sold last year, seen this year. To the bottom of that is a single family home at 238 Atherton. It was purchased for 20 million, an increase of 12.9. And then two more. This is a residential property at 126 Stockbridge Avenue. I couldn't find a street view because of all the trees. The property sold for 22,180,000, an increase of 11 million. So roughly it doubled when it sold. And then to the right of that, a single family home at 275 Camino Al Largo, purchased for 11 million. Subsequently added improvement values and the increase this year was 11.1. So the property then sold in 2024 for 29. That 29 will be on your roll next year. So you'll see roughly an $18 million increase on that sale. And again, all of the 40 largest increases, if I look down that list, the lowest amount added due to a sale was $5.8 million. However, last year, the lowest amount added was more than that. So this is a little bit less overall. Yes, sir.
So following up on the question that around SB 9, if a parcel, 1 acre parcel with a single family home on it is subdivided under SB 9 and half their parcel goes vacant, would it be taxed as a vacant lot?
All property is taxed based on the value of the property. It doesn't make any difference what it is. If the vacant lot is valued at $250,000, it'll be taxed at that. If it's valued at 4 million, they'd be taxed at 4 million.
So it'd be taxed higher though when they house.
Yes. Not only will the value of the property go up, the value of the land will go up too, because it's more valuable with something sitting on it than with the trees and the chaparral that's out there.
So it's a greater benefit to the town if a 1 acre parcel sells as a single family home as a single 1 acre parcel. It's a better benefit to the town if it subdivides into SB 9, half of it becomes vacant, then gets built upon, then gets sold, and we have
Shoot.
much
Yeah.
bigger benefit. Because
So the people that are doing SB 9 lot splits but aren't building anything are going to get a tax break? Is that what I understand? Because their property is now vacant, half of their
they'll have two
property is
bills.
Now
vacant.
they have two property tax bills, one at their current,
Yeah,
where the property resides. Now the second property,
is vacant.
but it'll still get valued at what the value of that vacant property would be. Probably it'll be 7 million, 5 million. I mean,
Yeah, let's say the land value was 3 million
Okay,
and the building was 7 million,
yeah.
total of 10. They've now cut off half of the 3. So now this will be 8.5 million. This will be 1.5 million or whatever the math was. I lost my numbers already. But they're both going to be taxed. And then when they build something here, this will go up as well.
You know, I understand that when they build it. It may be a way that they get a tax break. Anyway, okay. All right, no problem. Thank you.
The next report is just a comparison of the sales transactions that we saw last year and this year. Last year in 2023, there were 95 single-family homes that sold during that year. In the first 8 months of this year, there have been 48 single-family homes that have sold. And if I were to assume that you would have the same number of sales that you had in the last 4 months last year, this year, that would add 35. You would be under the number of properties that sold last year. That's just a guess. I don't know what's going to sell. You could have 3 homes sell in the next 4 months and that would be it. So until they sell, we're not going to know, and we will know before we do the forecast. To the right of that shows that in 2023, the single-family homes that sold last year had a sale price that was 1.63% lower. There we go. 1.63% lower than the prior year. And in the first 8 months this year, the sale prices are down 21.72%. That was evidenced on that report that I showed you. And the reason I showed you that report was to sort of hit home why you've got a lot of properties that are selling for less than the value on the roll. And that's what we're seeing here. We use that information in a graph. And this graph itself is in your handout as well as in the packet. In the first 8 months of the year, there have been 48 single-family homes and 3 other properties, vacant probably or without a use code on them at all, that have sold in calendar year 2024. And those 51 properties, when we look at the difference between the sale price and the original value, will have an additive next year of 132,488,316. And the town of Atherton, you've got $16.3 billion in value. In order to increase your value 1%, I need 1% of that number. 1% of that is $163.8 million. So every increment due to sales transactions, new construction, whatever, and multiples of 163.8 million, we can add 1% to the 2% CPI you're going to get. And right now, that $132 million is the equivalent of 0.8%. In the current year, you saw 2.74% due to sales transactions. So even if this were to double, you would not be as high as you were this year. So again, this is one reason why 25.6 is not going to be as robust as the growth that we saw in 24.5, unless something big happens. And again, I don't know who's putting property on the market. I don't know how long it's going to stay. I'm not knowing whether or not the interest rates are really attractive at a 50 basis points or whatever they're lower at right now. So we really have to see more sales in the next 4 months to get us to a point that we're going to be able to get above 3 or 4% growth next year.
I have a comment or a question about the interest rates and how much interest rate fluctuation really impacts some of these larger.
You probably not as much as the city of Newark.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would think that you're not going to go
Yeah.
buy a
Yeah.
$35 million house and put down 5 million and finance 30.
Right.
Okay. You just, I
Yeah,
don't
you've
see
got
that
it.
happening.
Yeah.
I think most of these, 10 million and over, it's all cash.
So one thing I noticed yes, this one. So we've only got 8 months of data for 2024, and it says we've sold 48 single-family residential. So even if you assume a flat, if it's going to keep at the same rate, which is probably not a good assumption for the winter, but in any event, if you assume that only gets us up to 72 single-family residential sales.
Right.
And
As
last
opposed to
year,
90 something last year.
compared to 95, that's a big drop.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look at 2021 and 2022, you went from 133 to 93. So you lost 40 sales in that year. So this is not unprecedented. And you always claw your way back.
That's for our
I'd love to
budgeting
say that it's
purposes.
permanent, but it's never going to be permanent.
Projections.
You
Okay,
should mention
I'll
that
do
to
the
rest-
flowers from
you
now
should
on.
mention that to the rest of the council. George, mention it when you have your one-on-ones to a few other people.
About not giving away money?
Yes.
Yes, I put it in my email.
Come on.
There you go.
I could give you some names.
One more.
Anthony, can you advance the slide?
Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yay.
And then one more.
Well, yeah, the
Yeah,
other
click
screen
it
on
again.
too.
There you
So-
go.
This just gives you a sense of where you are in comparison to the other cities in the county. Maybe you don't want to look at this. But your median price is the lowest, the highest decline in the county. Next to you, the city of Colma, and then the city of Hillsborough. Then we have Portola Valley, Redwood City, and San Bruno. Everybody else is positive. The countywide growth is actually a positive change year over year. The graph on the right, one more time, Anthony, looks at the growth of, thank you, the growth of the number of sales that we've seen. The properties that are in the blue, the light teal, and the dark teal, those properties have sold since 2000. So by decade, 2000 to 2009, 2010 to 19, and 2020 to 24, and that swath. And more than 60% of your single-family homes have turned over at least once in the past 24 years.
Good.
I don't think you had a lot of foreclosures in a lot of cities. I can say, oh, back in 2005 and 6, you had a lot of foreclosures. Those short sold and then they sold again. I don't think you had that problem.
Yep.
Please advance.
I
Just
guess
got 2
this
more
is
slides to look at.
Time to buy your cemetery plot up in Colma.
Yeah.
Because the prices are down 13%.
These are the top 10 taxpayers in each of the past 2 years. The ones on the right are the top 10 last year. The ones on the left this year. If there's nothing in front of the owner on the far right, they're in the same position. So Pink Sunset is number 1 in both years. Some of the properties like the Pacific Peninsula Group have picked up a parcel. Southern California Water Service moved down the list. So on the right, if the arrow moves down, they're in a lower position on the list, but still in the list. If it moves up, they're in a higher position in the list. I looked up Tan Lip Boo Trust on the way here. They purchased their property. That's why the $ is there. None of your top 10 have got appeals. That's good news. And the 2 new owners are people who purchased their property. If you look at the net change, you will see that 1, 2, 3, 4 of your top 10 this year just got the 2% CPI. They're just sitting where they are, getting the 2% CPI for Prop 13. All the other ones had positive changes, either due to the addition of parcels, the addition of new construction, or a sales transaction.
Paula, I have a question about number 2, Pacific Peninsula Group. Why does it not have the star that says they just joined the top 10? Because I don't see them in the prior year's list.
Because one of the that's a
Did they
good
change their
question.
name or something?
Yeah, last year, I think it was
PPG.
Pacific Peninsula LLC. I'll look it up for you.
Well, it's just, I didn't see anything from the prior year that had a name anywhere close to that.
Right. They actually added $35 million to their total parcel by purchasing another parcel, and that's why they moved up in the group.
But they weren't in my point is they weren't in the list that I have for the prior
Right, they
year.
were not.
Anyway, just a question.
And
It
it
may
could
have
be,
been number 11, but I can check and see where they were. They could have just been outside the top 10 last year.
correct.
Okay, so maybe they're just missing the star. Okay.
Yeah.
And it could be one of those parcels that of the 170 Atherton that were purchased. Also.
Okay.
The
Thanks.
last slide, please, Anthony. And for a council, I think this graph is the most important graph that you'll find this year. It shows you the reasons for the growth in value in the past 10 years. The green bar is the portion of the growth this year and in every year that's due to properties that are selling and adding value due to that component where the sales price is more than the assessed value. And you'll notice that probably 2024 is similar to what we saw in 2020, but lower in every other year than what we've seen going forward. New construction, the blue, a little lower than a couple of years, but it's pretty average, a lot lower than last year, and probably about the same as we saw 2 years ago. The 2% CPI, it's the orange, it's not always 2%. It wasn't 2% in 2021 because of the pandemic, and it wasn't 2% in 2016. It was close. But all the other years, And then the unsecured, you don't have a lot of unsecured, it's the blues, I mean, the purple, so it's pretty irrelevant. But I think that the real story here is if you go back and look at the growth that you saw in 2022 and maybe 2021 and 3, based on sales transactions, it was more than you're seeing this year. And that's one of the reasons for 24-5, we didn't see the kind of growth that we've seen in the prior years. Any questions?
That's
You can go to the last slide. And I know it's like drinking from a fire hose to talk to me.
No, this is very helpful. It's not good news for us, but
Well, I
you know.
I'd have to go back. You first hired me in 2012. And I think at that time you had come out of the recession, but you weren't picking up as much value as you thought you should have. And so you wanted somebody to do an analysis on that. And that's usually what drives us to somebody is, the county can't be right. There's got to be something going on here, right? Yeah, they're hiding the money too. But I think by being able to show you graphically what is going on, that at least you don't kind of put your finger to the wind and hope that you guess right on the budget. I would rather go in with something than something you think might happen, because it rarely does. And then you have to look at where you're going mid-year and start making cuts. And I've been there. I don't like doing that either.
George?
Robert, what did you budget this year for?
just off the top of your head.
4 point, I think 5% in the 24,
And you-
25.
And you had a little more.
5% increase.
Yeah, and you had a little more than that.
Mhm.
So that was pretty conservative then,
yeah.
don't you think?
It's conservative,
We
yes.
pushed them
I mean, a
up.
percentage point, and I don't put new construction in my baseline forecast
Mhm.
because I don't know what it's going to be.
Mhm.
So if you leave that blank, you generally will have a conservative estimate because it's going to come in at 1% or more, right? But if you're in bargaining with employees and you don't want to withhold something that you're pretty sure is going to happen, budget half of the new construction that you got this year, next year. Don't budget it all, budget half. That kind of hedges it. And then mid-year, if it came in great, fine. If it came in less, something else might supplant it.
Mhm.
But your your excess ERAF is not in any of my numbers,
Right.
and you get
We
money.
put that below the line, Paula.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
That's
we
your
don't
funny money?
We don't bank on it all the time. We're always living in fear, like the sword of Damocles hanging over our head.
Because
you
there's
know?
always talk it'll go away.
Right.
The state will figure out a way. to
Right,
take it,
exactly.
to keep it.
This is gonna go away.
And it goes up
And it
every
comes in
year.
higher than it was the year before.
Better to have a
Hey,
good
Robert,
surprise than a
for
bad surprise.
14 years I've heard this.
The state tries to pay us for their own money.
That VLF swap was,
It's a good game, it's for them.
Yes,
Correct.
that VLF swap.
that's true.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Paula.
Pleasure.
It's great having you here in person. Appreciate it.
We missed you.
Aw.
Missed you in person. We definitely
Can I
did.
ask, you represent other cities in San Mateo County. So
All but a couple, actually.
okay, so that you've got your finger on the pulse
I
of them
do.
all.
Right. And
How is the multifamily developments impacting?
multifamily development that is market rate
Uh-huh,
is great. But most of the multifamily residential have an affordability component these days, 15% or more. A lot of them are 100% affordable.
Okay.
And that comes on like your college housing.
Mm.
It gets built, it gets occupied, they get the Title VIII or whatever their compensation backfill is, and they go off the roll.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not that I'm in opposition to affordable housing, you got to put it somewhere.
Yes.
But you don't go in assuming you're going to get revenue for affordable housing. It's just something you're doing. And it's going to end up
Yeah.
being a slight drag.
But the density is increased even for affordable.
Yeah.
I mean, market rate housing
Right.
too. The density, there is some.
There is.
Okay.
I think that some of the Nonprofit JPAs are putting more money into workforce housing now than they are into affordable. I think that's sort of that middle need
Yes,
that isn't being addressed as well.
that needs to be addressed in our area.
Magic pen. I don't like that pen.
Sorry. Okay.
Hey,
So just a couple other minor things. Paula was definitely the main event today. Robert, the next item says committee and staff reports and comments. Do we have any from George or Robert?
No.
Okay, just a placeholder. And then future agenda topics. I just wanted to ask about the progress that you and Bob Polito have been making and when we might be a good time to schedule you to present to the committee, the CalPERS review you're doing.
I don't think we've made any progress.
Oh, dear.
Oh.
Since the last time they were here, because we haven't heard anything from them. have we?
Been in communication with
thank you, Paula.
Julian. There's some reports,
Erase it.
Cognos reports that can be printed. I just need to see which ones there are to provide on some data on the asset, the liability. And then they're reviewing the presentation to see the questions that were in there as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are logged into their pension
Pension outlook.
outlook tool, which can be used to see if you make is it ADP, if you make one of
Mhm.
those,
Mhm.
how much it's going to reduce the future payments and increase the percent. So I think we'll be working on that.
And then I think on that one, you can also adjust the rate of return every year. You can also factor in, I think right now it's at 6.8%, but if we factor in the discount rate, you can manipulate it if it's going to be 7% as well. You can do, I think, up to 5 years. So you can do like the first year 6.8, and then the other 2 years you can change. You can
Yeah, you can use it.
yeah,
maybe
change
to do
those.
like
You can
a
do
worst case
hypotheticals,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Yeah,
Mhm.
you have limited flexibility
Mhm.
on that.
Mhm.
It's sort of like you can do returns that are 25 to 50% of normal, or, you know,
Mhm.
it's like quartiles.
And then you can do there's variables that we can adjust to. I think the CPI, some of that can be adjusted, but the main components that they want us to, that they allows us is to change of the discount rate. If we do an ADP, if we do an ADP in multiple years, I think is one of the uh, possibilities that we can use in the pension outlook tool. But that data that is in there is the updated information as of the June 30th, 2024 information that's in the
in
pension
where-
outlook. The actuarial reports is
Okay.
updated in that pension outlook tool. They'll update that what's in there right now is the most recent data that they have.
Oh. And have they come up with the final rate of return for,
Not yet. I haven't seen anything. I think it might be, I think next week there's a meeting to disclose what that was. Correct. It was 9.3.
9.3 is what they reported. Julian said he had heard unofficially that it might be 9.5.
Yeah.
And that would that would result in a gain on the safety plan of $1 million. So that would be a plus, $1 million plus. So that would be good news.
Yes.
We'll just have to see.
Another future agenda topic, Robert, and I talked about the best way to get this committee or a couple of people as a subcommittee of this committee to be a little more involved earlier on in the audit. And we're talking about how the best to do that so that it's helpful to the town and keeps us informed. So we'll get back to you on exactly how we're going to do that, but we're definitely talking about ways to make that happen this year. The next meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 at 2 p.m. right here.
We'll all be older. That seems so far away,
It does.
and yet it's really coming up
That's
fast.
right. I remember when I was in like high school and then there was a song and it was in the year 2525 and now we're going to be in 2025. So we're getting there.
Oh.
Okay. If there's no further business, the meeting is adjourned. 3:01.